Hi there, my name's Andy Young and I'm one of the automotive lecturers down at Unitech in Auckland, New Zealand, and welcome to my Andy Mechanic YouTube channel. Now, it just so happens at the moment I'm teaching transmission and drivetrains, and it's about time that I did some videos covering that particular subject. And I've got here one of the front drive shafts from the infamous RAV4. Yes, I know the engine's still in bits and I haven't fixed it. But that doesn't stop me pulling apart some more bits of it, and I'm going to pull apart this particular drive shaft. We've got the tripod joint here, and we've got the CV joint at this end. So on this particular video, we're going to cover the tripod joint, I think. Let's do the tripod joint first. We'll strip it all down, and I'll show you how to inspect it for wear and common problems and bits and pieces, and how to reassemble it. And then I'll show you how, and I've gone to no expense spared, and I've bought some new clips, so I can show you how to install the steel bands around the rubber boot to secure them properly and not use zip ties. Now, in order to access the tripod joint, you're going to need a set of side cutters, and we're going to cut the bands, the metal bands off the large one and the small one, and slide that boot back. Okay, so pretty easy. We'll just cut through those metal bands and try and find a point where it's just single thickness, and of course try not to damage the actual boot itself, unless of course you change the boot. There we go, look, that's that one off. Pretty easy. And these are a use once item. It's not something that you can reuse really. There we go. Okay, and then just pull the boot back. Now of course we're going to find lots and lots of grease in there, which is always a bit of an issue. So plenty of rags to hand. And we should now be able to extract the female part of the joint. There we go. And we've got tons and tons of grease. Oh, look at all that. That's just lovely. Nice. Classic case of contaminated grease there. Great. Okay, goodbye rag. In the bin. This is why you save all your old rags, isn't it? Jobs just like this. Kingpin bearings. They usually use lots of rags, don't they? Okay. Well, that should just about do us for now, I reckon. That's the bulk of it out of the way. And you really want to be wearing gloves for this kind of stuff, you know. You don't want all this going on your skin, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis. Okay. Okay, so you can see a little circlip just on there, and we'll just ping that off. A little flat screwdriver is really useful for this because it helps you to prevent it, you know, from pinging back when you slip off. There you go. Easy. Now, once that's out of the way, we can remove this from the end of the shaft. Now you've got to use your soft faced hammer and just give it a little tap because it's quite often pretty tight on there. I don't think. Oh, there you go. Look. Oh, mint. Okay. Now what we should do before we go any further, just as a matter of course, is just mark the outer end. I'll just put a bit of a paint pen on there. I'm going to mark that so I know which end is the outer, just to be on the safe side. So we can just blob some paint pen on there. The white is outside. Okay, so we'll pop that down there. And now we can remove the boot. And we'll give that a really good clean now that it's off the shaft. Super. Okay, so the next job, before we go any further, is to inspect the drive shaft itself. And you want to be inspecting all the splines on there, and of course the circlip groove. That's the circlip groove there. Look, we're going to check that's okay, make sure all the splines are intact, and of course the wear on the splines as well. And as these splines wear, the peak of each of the splines becomes thinner. So it's very important that it hasn't completely worn away. And given the fact that the joint was pretty tight on the splines, it's a good indication that there's not really much wear going on. If it was slack on there, then of course, you know, lots of wear. Okay, there we go. Right, so now we can look at the joint itself and the female part of the joint. Okay, so I've cleaned everything up and we can see inside the female part of the joint with all the grease gone, we can see where the contact points are on there. That sits inside, and so the normal area of travel is where all the paints come off. So that's where we're going to expect the maximum amount of wear. And as the suspension on the car gets compressed, that joint ends up further in. And as the suspension on the car ends up, you know, getting more slack and the car's higher, so the wheel drops into a pothole, then this inner joint here slides further out to compensate for the change in distance between the gearbox and the wheel. So that's why you have a tripod joint. And well, let's first of all look at the bearing itself. And you can see in there, it's a bit like a universal joint that you find in the prop shaft, where you've got all the little needle roller bearings in there, look. And you can inspect those pretty well without taking the outer race off. Just rotate it round, you can feel for play on there. You know, side to side, how worn does it feel? Are there any of the rollers broken? That kind of stuff. It can be taken off. You can disassemble it if you're really keen. Not that we're going to do that though. But down here, if you look just there under that grease, there's like the ends of a little circlip, and you can ping that out, and then you can pull all that off, and the rollers will go all over your bench. So if that's what you fancy doing, go for it. But I'm not going to do that. And in all honesty, when you have to replace one of these, you end up getting a whole drive shaft anyway. So this collar here performs two functions. It's the outer race of the needle roller bearing, and it's also a bearing that runs on the inside of here. So as that runs up and down here, you can see very, very clearly that the majority of wear, it spends nearly all of its time in that area there. That's where the paints come off. And a screwdriver is a really good way of checking for wear, because you'll be able to feel any kind of step in the metal up and down there. This is actually in really good nick. Yeah, sure, the paint's come off, but that's expected. But there's no real appreciable wear at all on any of those contact areas. Not at all. Really, really good. You know, and it's cleaned up pretty well. There's no damage on there. Other stuff to look for as well is obviously the splines at this end. These are the splines that go into the gearbox on the car. Obviously, you know, transaxle or a rear diff if it's a Subaru or something. And that little circlip there, when you push it in, that gets compressed and drops into the groove to allow us to get it obviously through the female splines, which is obviously usually part of the differential gears that are there, the side gears, and that basically is what holds the joint in place. Now, if you saw the Toyota MR2 video where that seal was leaking, basically what had happened is the drive shaft somehow had got knocked out slightly, and basically the area here where the seal runs, and I think I've actually got the original seal from the video, there you go, look, that would run on there basically like that. You know, obviously this has got an O-ring down there, but you know, it would sit like that, and it had pulled out. So for some reason that little circlip had failed, and you are really supposed to replace those every time you take the drive shaft out, because they get weakened, and that could have been one of the reasons why it came out. Who knows? Okay, well, that's basically all you need to do when you're inspecting these, is to check for cracks in the housing and check for wear on the contact surfaces on the inside. Make sure the splines are all good. Replace the circlip. Obviously we've got an O-ring there, so you'd replace that on this particular vehicle. This is off the RAV4, don't forget. So we'll go with that. And, you know, is there any play on here? Well, not really. It feels, I can feel a tiny amount, but there always will be a small amount, even on new bearings. But it spins freely, there's no noise, there's no broken rollers. Again, check the inner splines, they're all good. Again, it's a pass. So what else have we got to check? Well, obviously you've got the tripod boot. the rubber boot. Now, is this an original one, do you think? It could be. It's got a pretty long part number on it. So again, check that for cracks. Now obviously I've cleaned it all off so we can see really well what's going on. Just check around there, because now's the time to change it, you know. If this has got any kind of failure on it, put a new one on. But if there's nothing wrong with it, and it's the original Toyota one, then don't stick a cheap Chinese one on, because that won't last 5 minutes. You'd have been better off leaving the original one on, because they're far better quality. Okay, well that looks pretty good too. Excellent. So that joint has passed. Okay, so we've inspected the bearing unit, and that's all fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. We've inspected the boot, and that's in really good condition, and it's a genuine Toyota one, which means it's going to last for ages. And we've got basically the outer housing, the female part of the joint, and again, all of that looks pretty good. But don't forget, you should really replace that little circlip on the end there, look. And we've got an O-ring, and that should be replaced again before you install it back in the vehicle. That's what Toyota will say. Always put new ones on. But there's nothing else for us to do to the joint now. We can reassemble it, fill it with grease, and slide the boot over, and I can show you how to use, or how to fit, these steel clips. Now, it's important that you use these and not zip ties, because these can clamp the boot in place far, far more positively than a cable tie can. It's just more professional. This is what you should be using. Okay, so we've finished the inspection of the tripod joint, and we're going to do the reassembly. Now, this does require copious amounts of grease, because it obviously needs to be lubricated. So I've got my my grease to hand. Now, I won't put grease on straight away, because I want you to be able to see what's going on. And when it's all covered in grease, you really can't see. So we'll build up as much as I can. Maybe I'll do the whole assembly without grease, and then I'll just pull it apart and put the grease in, just so you can see what needs to be done. It's pretty easy though. Here we go. Okay, so when you're working on the tripod joint, the first thing to go back on, obviously, is the boot. Don't forget that. So pop the boot on first. Just slide it all the way down. Obviously, I've cleaned this one out. And it's been a bit stubborn. There we go. So get the boot all the way down as far as you can, out of the way. Now, grab the joint, and remember we put some white paint pen on the outer side, so we know which way around that goes. And again, we can just drop that onto the splines and push it down. Now, it did come off without needing a hammer. I think, actually, we're just going to give it a little tap on, because it's probably on different splines now. So we can use a soft-faced hammer. There we go, let's give it a little tap down. No bother. Okay, so we know it's all the way home because the circlip groove is now accessible. Now again, make sure you get the circlip the right way around. And it's going to be, there's the paint, so we're going to be that way around. There we go. Okay, let's pop that into place. Now you should really use a new circlip every time. Perfect. Right, so that's all ready now for us to fill up, or fill this with grease, slide it over the top, and clip on the boot. And hey presto, that really is all you have to do on a tripod joint. Very, very simple to assemble. So I'm going to pull that back off, I'm going to cover everything in grease, and then I'll show you how to fit those clips that hold the boot in place. And when you're greasing these things up, make sure you get grease absolutely everywhere, you know, make sure there's nothing that hasn't got the grease put on it. It's very important. Make sure all the rollers have got fresh grease, because you've just cleaned it all out. Now, I didn't use degreaser. I didn't want to be too harsh with the whole thing. And there was still a little bit of the old grease left. Right, let's dig some more out. There we go. Excellent. Pull that back, get some grease in there. Cool. Now we need to get a big chunk just behind there. There we we go, in the boot itself. So I'll whack that in there. Yes, you can have too much, but you can often have too little as well. So I'll just pop that in there like that. Right, now what's next? Well, clean the hand. We're going to need some grease actually inside the outer joint as well before we slide it on. Jeez, we need a longer paintbrush. There we go. Okay, so make sure that you cover all the surfaces. You don't want this thing running out and starting to run hot. It's going to cause a bit of a problem. Cool. Okay. So we can slide that back on there now. And just slide the boot up. Okay. Bit of a cleaning session. Get rid of the excess grease because you don't want grease on the outside. That's not the idea. Otherwise it's going to spray off onto all the components. Like on your brakes and stuff. That's bad. Exhaust and burn and catch fire and customers die. I tend to get quite upset when that happens. Not that it's happened to me though, obviously, but you know, you can imagine they'll be a little bit upset. Yeah, work tidy, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Okay, so now we're about ready for installing those metal bands. And I have a special tool for that. I'll show you what it is. Okay, so other than the two bands that you're going to need, and you need one small one and obviously one large one, you really also need one of these tools. Now these are pretty cheap. These cost about $20–30 here in New Zealand. I think this one came from Repco. I've had it about, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I really can't remember. It's just, I bought it once and never had to replace it. It just seems to work really well. What brand is it? I just don't know. Maybe it's Repco's own. It's just got Pat on there. So maybe it used to belong to, yeah, Pat. It's Pat's. It works. It's all that matters. Okay, so you could do one of those. You really do need one of those. And you could also do with a small hammer. And you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so the first job is to make sure that the tripod joint is, or the boot, is all the way down on the shaft. Now you see these two grooves here with a little ridge in the middle. That's where that boot should sit. And we'll just give it a wiggle down. And there we are, look. Get it into position. So that's where it should sit. And you can see now, if I pull it back again, you can see those grooves. So we'll stick it back down. Perfect. Now it is better, if you can, to make sure that that groove is grease free, because you'll find that the rubber will actually adhere to it a lot better. It won't be as, you know, as easy for it to move off. So we'll just slide that back down again. A lot less grease in there now. There we go. Okay, and of course the large one's already in position. So we'll start off with the small one. And to do that, just unwrap it out. And let's do it towards the camera again. So we'll do it that way around. And we'll thread that through there. Now, it's quite long this, which means we can go around twice. It's good practice, makes it a lot stronger and far less likely to fail. But it also gears down the tensioning. You know, we can actually get it a lot tighter with a lot less force on the tool as well. So once it's in position, just sort of pull it reasonably tight with your hand and then kink it over so it can't lose tension again. And then make sure you straighten that back out again. There we go, look. Okay. Now, with the tool, it's got a cutter down at this end here, so when you turn that, it slices through the metal and cuts off the tail that you don't need. And it's also got here a little winch sort of drum that you thread this through that slot there, look, and then when you turn it, it sort of winches it in. It's pretty cool. And to get it started, you've got to thread it through that little hole at the end there, look. So we'll do that. We'll slide that through there, through the cutter, and then down towards the little drum unit at the end. We'll slide it through the slot in the drum. There we go, look. Then push it out the bottom so it's not in the way. And we'll take that down. And now we're in contact essentially with the base of the clip. Now at this point we can start to reel that in, bring the tool towards so that the whole thing runs straight, and now we can tension it up, and you can see it being drawn through at the start of the tool entering in. Now you don't want to go mad, it doesn't need to be massively tight. Okay, and then once you've got the tension you want, bring it back, and now it's time for the cutter. Now there's two ways to cut it. You can cut it like that, and that'll give you a shorter tail, or you can cut it there. It doesn't really matter too much. I'll do a short one, so I'm going to clip it there, look. Perfect. Take it off, and very quickly bend it over. The sooner you bend it over the better, the less chance it has of losing tension. Now we can rotate that around a bit just because it's for the camera. There we go. Okay, and if you get your little hammer, see these two little tines here, one either side. Well, basically, before we tap those over, we're going to tap the joint down. That gives you a nice, sharp, sort of 180-degree turn on the end of the wire, or the, what do you want to call this, the strip. And then once you're ready, just tap those over like that. That's one, and it's real soft stuff. You don't need to go mad. There we go. Okay, so that's the small one done, just the large one left. So let's do that one next. So again, grab the new clip and just undo it a couple of times. Now, we don't have to completely undo this one. We can slide that over the end and we can tension it up. There we go. So bring that round into the groove. Make sure you're in the groove. That's really, really important. You only get one chance at doing this. Thread it through again. There we go. Okay, right. Double check you're in the groove. Yep, we are. Tension it by hand. Fold it back on itself a little bit so it can't lose the tension. Eject the old used bits right out your tool. And then you can feed it through again. So through the front of the tool, through the cutter, and then into the drum. And then just sort of deflect it downwards a bit out of the way so it can go somewhere. And then you can start to take up the tension. Once you've got tension, move the tool across so it's now, you know, the strip is in line with the flow off there, and then we can tension that up. There you go, like you see, nice and tight. And then when you're ready, bring it back. Very important that you bring it back before you cut it, otherwise it'll just spring back and you'll be basically screwed. And we'll give that a cut, take it off, bend it over quickly, get your little hammer, give it a tap, and then just fold over the two little tabs. There's one, two. And that's it, done. And it's really easy to do on the bench, obviously with the whole drive shaft out, and it looks really professional to the customer if he looks under his car. Not that many do anymore, but if he does, he can tell straight away that you've not used cable ties and that you've done a good job. Okay, so there you go. That's how to dismantle, inspect, and reassemble a tripod joint. And the tripod joint is there to allow additional length to the drive shaft to allow for suspension movement. Pretty simple. And the CV joint at the other end, well, that just basically has no change in length. It just basically allows the drive to change direction. Okay, so if you've got any questions or comments, then why not leave them down the bottom, and I'll do my very best to give you a hand and get you sorted out. If you'd like to subscribe, click the subscribe button, and next to it is the little notifications symbol, the little gear symbol. Click on there and you can turn on notifications, and that way you're going to receive an email whenever I upload any new videos, and there's usually around 3 or 4 every week. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's a couple less, but you know, it depends on my workload, to be honest. Okay, well, if you want to check me out on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook, and I think I'm on Twitter somewhere as well, dig me out, you'll find me on there, and send me a message if you like. Okay, crew, well, thanks for watching, and you have been watching the Andy Mechanic YouTube channel. Cheers, over and out.